Hello, Master Gardener Trainee. This is part 4 of vegetable gardening. Weed control. It's a process and it is sometimes very daunting in Florida with our heavy rains, warm temperatures and all, but it's an important thing to talk about in vegetable gardening. Generally, we don't do a lot with herbicides because they can damage the desirable vegetation. So most of us will do weed control by the old-fashioned method of cultivation, using garden hose and other claws and things like that. Hand pulling always is effective. Mulching, whether it's with leaves or pine straw or something like that. Again, herbicides during the growing season I would not recommend. In the off season, possibly glyphosate if you're not opposed to that. It breaks down quickly, it gets tied up by the soil organic matter, would be pretty innocuous for your next season. Some things not to do is don't compost perennial or weeds or plants that are in seed that are weedy. Unless you're composting very hot, which is about 135, 140 degrees Fahrenheit, you probably won't kill the weed seeds off. And ideally, if you can keep your vegetable garden plot weed free in the off season of summer. Some people will cover it with black plastic during that period of time. Cultivation has more than just the reason of weed control. It also will help aerate and loosen the soil, allowing for better water penetration. It also is a good time to kind of scuffle in the fertilizer you may have applied earlier in the day. It also does look kind of nice when you don't have a lot of weeds. But you have to be careful when you cultivate not to go down too deep because most of your vegetable roots are in the upper foot or less of garden soil. And as I mentioned, this would be a good time to apply fertilizer and then cultivate. Now, I love this picture for a lot of reasons. First of all, it's a very good looking vegetable garden. The woman in the picture looks awfully happy out there, standing there hoeing in her garden in the heat. Uh, I suppose that shot is a little bit of a setup. The other thing I like about this particular picture are the bright gaudy flowers that she has around the perimeter of her vegetable garden. That is helping to draw pollinators into her garden to help pollinate her vegetables. Way to go! Mulches, I did touch upon this. You can use hay or pine straw. Hay can bring weeds to the party. Pine straw can bring some, but not nearly as many. Unfortunately, pine straw is very expensive to purchase, but you may have a bunch of pine straw from pine trees on your property. Leaves are great for mulch. They're usually free. That's my favorite word, as you know. A lot of times in the late winter, early spring, you'll see the big puffy bags of plastic bags on the curb at the neighbor's house. Typically, those big, large plastic bags are full of oak leaves. If you knock on the door real nice and talk real nice to your neighbor, he or she will probably allow you to cart off those bags of leaves that you can use as mulch around your vegetables. And the best part is the neighbor almost never asks for those plastic bags in return. You just scored an extra few plastic bags for free. Now, some people worry about oak leaves and pH. I think this is greatly overrated. It takes a long time to shift the pH more acidic even with oak leaves. Yes, oak leaves are acidic, as are pine needles, but again, doing a soil test once a year, we could correct for that if it got too acidic. Bark or wood chips could be used. Again, stay away from any that are colored or dyed mulches. Yard waste, I would be careful with this one in the sense that I would not want to use weaves or other things like that. Sawdust could be used as a mulch, but it packs down really tight, may reduce water flow and airflow into the soil. In some parts of the state of Florida and even Georgia, peanut hulls are widely available and could be used as a mulch. Now, we generally don't see homeowners using poly or plastic mulch in the garden. It's usually used more in the commercial settings where they hill up the soil and then cover it immediately with plastic and then cut a hole to plant the plant like tomatoes or strawberries or whatever. It could be done in a home setting, but I find it's very difficult to get the irrigation lines in there and check on plants. Personally, I think it's best left for the professionals. Newspaper could be placed underneath your mulch as a weed barrier of sorts. Please stay away from the really highly colored sections of the paper, the magazine foldouts, the coupons, things like that, or the real glossy, shiny papers as well. The rest of the newspaper is fine. 2 or 3 or 4 sheets down on the ground and then a layer of mulch to kind of hold it in place will keep out a lot of weeds. A lot of MGs will use this in between the rows of their vegetable garden. I also know MGs that have used cardboard in a similar fashion. Cardboard will last you probably much of the 2 or 3 growing seasons, depending on rainfall and time of year you initially put it down. Now, I have never used carpet as a weed mat in a vegetable garden, but have used it in other places where I've had stone or rock. It does work for about 3 or so years before the whole thing just rots away. And here we can see various mulches used on these vegetables here. We got oak leaves in the lower right-hand picture around some kind of cucurbitaceae, I don't know which one. And we got some straw or pine needles maybe around that developing corn and maybe some beans that are pole bean type beans that are twining up the corn. You may have to support some tall plants, especially if you're growing things like indeterminate tomatoes. We won't go into a lot of details about determinate and indeterminate tomatoes in our modules, but most tomatoes are what we call vining. You may have heard that expression. And those will keep on growing much like Jack and the Beanstalk. Some people are surprised that tomatoes will grow 9 to 12 feet tall before they're killed off by diseases, insect attacks, or frost. But they can keep on going, those indeterminate. A lot of times people are now growing more of the bush type or determinate. They'll grow so high, flower, and quit growing taller. There are pros and cons to each that we won't talk about in vegetable gardening. So you may need stakes for these indeterminate type tomatoes if you have pole beans, peas, things like that. Some people do trellises, especially with the cucurbitaceae, the cucumbers, squashes, and things like that. I have seen chain link fence be used as a support for various vining vegetable crops. For tomatoes that are determinate or bush type, I much prefer cages to any other method of containment. Some people use the plant to plant that was seen in the last photograph or slide with the corn serving as a stake for the pole beams. Here are tomatoes in a cage. Now, if you're going to cage determinate type tomatoes or bush type tomatoes, you want to make sure that the opening of the cage is easy enough for you to get your hands in there so you can get in there and pick the fruit. Alright, so we have some effects that may reduce our yield. We just got a call and somebody asking what is the potential yield of a crop on so many acres. Well, there is no one good answer, and there's a potential yield, and then you have something called crop failure. Even in the professional world, we have crop failures. Why can we have crop failures? We get an early frost in November, and your tomatoes were just about ready to ripen. That's why fried green tomatoes are popular, I guess, in the South. Rain. This is a big problem, especially in the fall when we're still getting heavy rainy season. You will probably have to control diseases on those plants that are susceptible, such as tomatoes. You may have a lack of rainfall at times, which means you'll have to supplement it. Humidity. Most of the year it's very humid in Florida, as you know. The dew points are usually 60 degrees and above. That's a perfect climate for fuzzy wuzzies to germinate, i.e. fungus, i.e. bacterial diseases as well. Light can be a problem. Now we think of Florida as being sunny. Well, it's true, we are considered the sunshine state, but we have a lot of overcast, especially as the rainy season is upon us. But we also are gardening from fall into spring. So when we're vegetable gardening in the dead of winter, we're doing it when the days are less than 12 hours. Roughly about 9 and so hours of day length is all we get. That makes it hard to grow tomatoes in the dead of winter, but we try. Wind. Sometimes we get a named storm blowing through. Well, that could damage a plant either by ripping it out of the ground, damaging the stem which moves water and nutrients around, and many other variables, or just knock the crop off like it did with citrus during Hurricane Irma. Then we have temperature issues. Some winters were nice and warm in January. Other winters, more typically, were cool. And then sometimes we flip-flop back and forth and round and round. This can be a challenge and a frustration to vegetable gardening. Other factors are seed germination. Seeds don't like to germinate generally in cold soil. So if we have a cold winter, it can take a long time for certain things to germinate. Bolting. We see this on a lot of the cool season crops, especially lettuce, spinach, those kind of things. As it gets hotter, they're an annual. They've lived their life. You've been picking them and harvesting them, hopefully. And then the heat tells them, hey, it's time to finish up your life and flower. Usually just before the bolting process begins, the lettuce and things start to get kind of bitter. I already mentioned cold damage and injury and issues, and we've also talked about that in the module cold protection, so I won't beat that horse too much more dead. Fruit disorders, well, that could take on a whole bunch of different meanings, everything from cat facing, misshapen, things, whether it's insect, disease related, wind, damage from other forces of nature. I talked about cold protection, so we won't beat it any deader than it already is. But again, sometimes just planting at the right time can get your crop in and out before you have to worry about the cold. Some of us who are in the colder areas of the county will learn to grow those things that are either love the cold or very cold tolerant. Most of the Brassicaceae, you know that one now, is very cold tolerant and sometimes can go into the teens with not much problem. I talked about safe planting dates already. Some of us will do this and make row covers, mobile containers, have covers ready, and so on and so forth. Again, covered in our cold protection module. Not all problems in the vegetable garden are caused by living factors. I've already touched upon many of those, and a lot of people don't seem to understand that some of this is just unavoidable. I mentioned the bolting. Here's what it looks like in some type of lettuce. I can't quite tell which one, if that's a romaine or a kind of a loose-headed lettuce. But you can see it was once a rosetta leaf, and all of a sudden it's starting to send up a spear, if you will. And near the tip, especially the picture of the plants on the right-hand side of the photograph, you can see the developing flower buds. Here's zucchini of some sort, a green one, and it's got yellow at the top. Notice how few leaves there are. There's probably some other issue with this plant that isn't really clear in this photograph, but much like us in the sun too long, we can it veggies can sunburn, and it's just a physiological issue, not nothing you can do. As far as providing shade to this plant, probably would not be helpful because the plant needs as much sun as possible to produce fruit. I haven't seen this one too often, but in the spring months, usually April time, we'll get these last hurrahs of a cold front out of Canada, and it'll be met with our moist, humid air coming up from the Gulf of Mexico, and then we get these strong fronts that bring in hail. I remember purchasing a new car 2 months earlier, only to see a hailstorm come by, and I was fortunate that my car, for whatever reason, dodged all those hailstones in the sense that they weren't big enough to cause damage. But in the Winter Haven, Lake Wales area back in the middle 90s, there were lots of cars driving down the road that had dimpled roofs, trunks, and hoods. I was one of the lucky few. But if you have a crop out there, it can be beaten up like that. Obviously, that could be picked in a home setting and the damaged area is cut off, but that's going to quickly rot and would not be um, a sellable crop if you were a commercial grower. This is a common phenomenon in tomatoes, and I'm going to talk quite a bit about it for a moment. There's something called tomato blossom drop. Here you can see some tomatoes are forming on this particular plant, and there's some flowers that are open, and there are some that are starting to wilt. Let's look at where the stem, look at right above where it says blossom in that yellow box. You can see a developing tomato there. Can you see the one I'm talking about? Just look above and you can see the calyx, the 5 little petals, if you will, put out, fanned out, and then there's a tomato just below that. Well, if you look at the stem, you can see appears to be a little line. Can you see that? What I'm trying to describe to you? There's a little line. That is called an abscission layer. Now, somebody's probably going, abscission. We've heard that before. Plants have abscission layers, and those plants, especially northern plants that shed leaves, will produce abscisic acid, and it'll drop leaves in the fall in a controlled process. You probably remember that from a botany module, and I think I mentioned it in another module if I remember correctly. The point I'm trying to make is if that isn't pollinated or it gets very hot, what happens is developing fruit may abort or drop off at that layer. Now, because it looks like such a sharp line, a lot of people think some insect or animal has bitten it off. No, it's just a natural abscission layer where it's supposed to drop it. Now, tomatoes have an unfortunate habit of not setting many fruit once the temperatures are above about 85 degrees Fahrenheit. There are a few cultivars out there that we've been trying to develop for Florida. I think one is called Solar. But they go a little warmer, maybe 88, before they quit pollinating. It just is a physiological phenomenon of tomato. Why it does it? It's a big kahuna question. You'll have to ask a big kahuna why when you get there. I don't know. The point I'm trying to make is think about when we plant tomatoes. We plant tomatoes about the end of February, early March. Okay, so now we go March, and usually we're in the lower to mid 80s at most. Then we go April. Well, now we're starting to get more into the 80s more reliably. So by about the end of April, that's about all the fruit that's going to set, maybe here and there in May. So whatever isn't developed by sometime in April or early May isn't going to happen. But if people who come from the north, like I did, plant their tomatoes on Memorial Day, which is the end of May, and wonder why they're not getting any production, well, they're up against the time clock for heat and diseases that are going to wipe out tomatoes by about Father's Day. But again, this is a common problem that people want to try to fix. The fix is to plant the tomatoes at the time of the year that's not too hot. You can get misshapen fruits for all sorts of reasons. It could be that it was just too tight in the cage, it got squished around. A lot of times insects, when they poke around, will cause cat facing and damage. Really no way to fix this. I'd be hard pressed to tell you the exact cause of this particular malshapen fruit. Then we have pollination issues. Remember Cucurbitaceae, you remember that family, correct? Is monoecious, separate male and female flowers. And only the girl flowers will get pregnant. You can tell in the upper left-hand photograph that's a female because you see the blossom, it's withered, but right behind the blossom attached to the stem of the zucchini, or yellow crookneck I should say, is the developing ovary, because this is a female flower. The male flower, the upper right-hand photograph, you can see, although petals are closed, that he does not have a little itty-bitty crookneck, yellow crookneck squash below, because he's a boy. He doesn't have ovaries. Got it, guys? Always have to explain it to the men. Anyhow, so you may have to play B if you're not getting good pollination. You could pick off that flower, and the lower left-hand photograph kind of shows what he did. He picked off the flower, cut the petals off, and he's using the stamens of the boy to gently dab the pollen onto the stigma of the female, thus ensuring pollination. Now in nature, bees do this, but again, sometimes we don't have a lot of bees in our area. Other times the bees just don't see the flowers because there isn't a whole lot of food in the neighborhood, or you didn't plant bright gaudy flowers around your vegetable garden. This is a very common problem that we see primarily more in the spring months of growing these various fruit crops, tomatoes, peppers, watermelon, and squashes, versus in the fall. Part of that it's usually droughtier and hotter in the spring. There seems to be some correlation between the two. Now, peppers and tomatoes are in the Solanaceae, the deadly nightshade. So the deadly nightshade family has similar problems a lot of times. Blossom end rot is very common. It's at the bottom of the fruit, away from where it was attached to the plant, hence blossom end rot. That's where the blossom end was before it fell off. Now this is a lack of calcium. It is not a disease. Why do we call it rot? Well, what has happened is these cells, as they were forming, lacked calcium. And calcium, kind of like in our bones and teeth, make the cell wall of these particular plants strong. And if it lacks calcium, the cells simply collapse, and then secondary infections get in there and start breaking down that collapsed tissue. It's really not a disease, it is a calcium deficiency. And you'll see it at the blossom end of squashes, you'll see it at the blossom end of watermelons. And why is that? What family are they in? Cucurbitaceae. They're cucumber family members. So cucumbers can get them, zucchinis, patty pans, butternut, etc. There's another disease out there of squashes and cucurbitaceae that this can mimic, but is the blossom end is relatively hard and dry. If it's a disease-causing organism, it's relatively soft and gooey. So this is a lack of calcium. So what I tell gardeners to do when they're growing either Solanaceae or Cucurbitaceae, that at the time of planting, right near the plant or around the little transplant, if they do it, put about a tablespoon of lime. Do we remember what lime is made from? Chalk, calcium carbonate, small amount of calcium right there. And then about halfway through the growing season, sprinkle another tablespoon or two around the plant further out. Now, a lot of people think if a little is good, a lot will be better. Again, that can start shifting the pH in the soil the wrong way. So a little dab will do you, if you will. That ends part 4 of vegetable gardening.